It is so nice to be here, and I'm just inspired by the mission of the World Affairs Council. So I guess I'm a sucker anytime Lubomir calls me and says, "Do you want to come to Charlotte and give a talk?" So I'm glad I'm here. Before I get into the talk, I just want to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. Lubomir held up those two books, and For the Love of Europe is a collection of my 100 favorite articles. I just always wanted to get my best writing together in one book. And thanks. And we sent a bunch of them here. And then the Travel as a Political Act book, it's just my report from every time I've had a real impactful trip. I like to just put it into that book. So this is the latest edition. And every time I go somewhere that is the kind of places we're going to be talking about tonight, I get to write it in there. And each of these books are well under the retail. They're about the wholesale cost. And Lubomir is just so passionate about getting this information out. So they're $15 each afterwards. And it comes with this very nice man. Right? As for the autographs, we've got another event a few minutes after I'm done, but what I love to do is sign books. And with a sizable crowd like this, I have a fun way to do it, and it's not a very polite English-style line, okay? So you're going to pretend you're in Italy, and you're just going to have a kind of a riot around me. It's like a mosh pit, and I found a spot outside to the right, and I'm about 3 minutes after I'm done talking. Those who would like an autograph can gather over there with their book or this thing or whatever. I got my Sharpie, and I stand in the middle, and I ask you just to gather around in 360 degrees and hold up whatever you want signed, and I just do this. And it's really fun. I get dizzy, and we all have a good laugh, and you can get your autograph in a hurry, and then you're on your way. And then your book is worth exactly what it was before. So, if you want to take a photograph, do it. If you want to ask me to pose, it's a waste of time because I'm not gonna, okay? So you can snap a photo all you like, but I just don't have time to pose with anybody because it would take everybody forever, and we got another gig to go to. So that's how that works immediately after. And now, my challenge is to share with you in 75 minutes or so the most important lessons I've learned from a lifetime of living out of a 9 by 22 by 14 inch carry on the airplane size suitcase overseas. I spend 100 days a year in Europe and beyond. Most of my focus is Europe. My job is to, Europe I see as the wading pool for world exploration. You know, it's your beginning. It's a springboard to places that I find much more interesting, frankly. And my mission with my 100 workmates in Seattle is to equip and inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. Okay? Nothing wrong with Orlando. Go there 4 or 5 times, 6 times, I don't care. But sooner or later, get a passport and get out there and get to know the other 96% of humanity. There's a lot of good stuff out there. And my favorite souvenir, I think, is bringing home this notion, this feeling, this belief, this understanding that the world is filled with beautiful people. It's filled with joy. It's filled with love. It's filled with people just like us that may find different truths to be self-evident and God-given with different world stories. And it's just so fun to get out there and celebrate that. I just love that. And that's what we're going to talk about. How travel broadens perspectives and inspires a global citizenship. As I mentioned, my beat is Europe. I write 80 books about traveling in Europe. Over the last 30 years, I love to give talks about travel and what I've learned. Didn't have a grand plan, but these are the 3 books out of those 80s that I think really sort of explain my passion for teaching. In the 80s and in the old beginning days, it was all about budget skills. My book, Europe Through the Back Door, it just came out. It's the first book I ever wrote. I self-published it in 1980. It just came out in its 40th edition this month. And it is the how to travel skills. I go over there, go to Europe, I make mistakes, I take careful notes, I bring home the mistakes, and then the lessons. So you can learn from my experience rather than your own, have a better trip. I hit and I miss and I miss and I hit and I bring home the hits and write them up so you can have a better batting average. When I get ripped off, I celebrate because they don't know who they just ripped off. I'm going to learn that scam, bring it home, and tell everybody about it. So that's what this book is for. And that is, I see it as a kind of Maslow's hierarchy of travel needs, okay? This is the bottom rung. How do you pack light? How do you stay safe? How do you get a hotel and a restaurant and catch the train? Well, I feel you could read a book about most of that stuff, and I would enjoy more teaching appreciation of art, cuisine, culture, history. So the next decade, I was all into sliding up that Maslow's hierarchy to a little higher rung, and it was featuring this kind of stuff, European history and art for the traveler. This book is designed for people who were sleeping in their history and art classes before they knew they were going to Europe. Now they got a trip coming up and they wish they remembered who the Etruscans were, okay? It is so exciting to learn about the history and the art in your travels. And then, since about 9/11, what I think about it, my passion has been for encouraging Americans to broaden their perspective through travel, to learn about home by leaving it and looking at it from a distance, and hang out with people you're not supposed to hang out with, just to learn what's out there. It's so fun, it's so exciting. And that's the top of that Maslow's hierarchy of travel needs, traveling in a way that broadens our perspective, traveling in a way where you think of culture shock as not something to avoid, but culture shock is a good thing. It's constructive. It's the growing pains of a broadening perspective. It just needs curation. That's what I offer, I hope, in my tours and with my books and TV shows, to encourage people to get out of their comfort zone and then get something out of it. Transformational. A lot of people in the tourist industry throw around that word, transformational travel. That's a trick to travel in a way that changes you. If you go to Cancun, the only thing that's going to change is your waistline, I think, But if you walk 6 blocks inland from Cancun and hang out with the people who are serving you, you'll learn something. And some people don't want to know that. Other people want to know that. I've been, as I said, 100 days a year since I was a kid, except for COVID, overseas. And I love it. And my most impactful moment, I think, on all those trips was on my very first trip. I was 14 years old with my mom and dad in Norway visiting the relatives. We were at the park behind the palace there at Frogner Park. And I just noticed from my little egocentric 14-year-old perspective, my parents were really loving me. I was just a pill. They didn't have a lot of money. This was their first trip to Europe. They were compromising hugely to take their son along. And I barely appreciated it. And they were just loving me. And I suddenly looked out in that park and it was speckled with other parents loving their kids. It was like a Monet painting to me. I can still see it. And I thought, wow, those parents love their kids as crazy as my parents loved me. And it occurred to me, this world is home to billions of equally precious little children of God. And it's so cool to get out there and get to know the family. When you do travel, you can travel with the window up or the window down. You can see cliches on stage and you can protect yourself from any of the realities, or you can actually roll down your window, metaphorically, and connect. Thomas Jefferson said that travel makes a person wiser, if less happy. I've always wondered about that, wiser, if less happy. Maybe it is more happy just to go to Disney World. There's one guidebook that outsells my Rick Steves Italy guidebook, and it's the guidebook to Disney World. That's a big market. What is it? It's La La Land. Okay, La La Land, great, fun, it's a holiday. Or there's reality travel. You have a choice. You have a choice. I'm not saying do one or the other. I'm saying mix it up. Mix it up. Travel makes us a citizen of the planet. Travel, I think, if you're a person of faith, connects you closer to God. And it reminds you that if you are a person of faith, if you believe that there's a God, then logically, everybody on this planet is children of God. That means we're all brothers and sisters. And every one of these great monotheistic faiths encourages us to love our neighbor. Well, if you look at it from a religious point of view, spiritual point of view, there is no difference in neighbor between across the street and across the sea. There's no difference in suffering between across the street and across the sea. Some people have a tough time imagining suffering far away, and if it's right there, it's real, and they fix it. Other people, maybe because they've traveled, understand that there's real suffering over there. I love the fact that different cultures are ethnocentric, different Christians are ethnocentric. It's okay. If you go, I was raised thinking Jesus spoke English and he looked like me. And now I realize he only spoke English as a second language. I love going to churches in different countries where people have different color skin and seeing what color skin baby Jesus has, you know? This is a Nicaraguan baby Jesus, you know? It's different than the one I was raised with, but he's still the same guy. So I love this idea of globalizing your idea of love thy neighbor. If you buy love thy neighbor, that's great. It's a great reason to care for your neighbors. If you don't buy love your neighbor, if in the privacy of the voting, if you have a cross on this lapel and a flag on that lapel, and you're all doing all the stuff right, but in the privacy of the voting booth, you don't love your neighbor, you can still care about your neighbor, only if nothing more than for stability on this planet. You know, I mean, to me, it's a great twofer. You can do it altruistically, or you can do it just because it's a practical investment in making this world a better place for our children. But one way or another, it behooves us to get out there and embrace the world. And I'm just so inspired by the World Affairs Council's mission, and I'm so thankful for our mission, which is exactly the same thing. As a person of faith, I am never alone in my travels. I wondered, how can I travel 100 days a year? I'm almost always alone with people I meet along the way. And it's because I'm not alone. It's pretty cool. People are thinking about different ways to be a traveler. You can travel as a tourist, you can travel as a traveler, you can travel as a pilgrim. Now, I think it's fun to travel as a little bit of all of that. I don't want to be just one hedonist on the beach, and I don't want to be one monk sitting cross-legged on top of a mountain. I want to have all of that mixed up together. And I'm a tourist. I got no problem climbing into that wooden shoe and getting a photograph taken. That's fun. But I'm also a traveler, and I'm also a pilgrim. A tourist is on vacation. Have fun. A traveler is interested in learning, is curious, it's experiencing something new, it enjoys that culture shock. And a pilgrim is interested in transformative travel, becoming something new. I like to look at the road as a playground, as school, and as church, mosque, or synagogue. And all of us can. Anybody can. And those who incorporate a little bit of pilgrim into their travels find it really enriches that. And sometimes it's a little awkward. We're not encouraged to be poetic and philosophical sometimes with shallow thinking that permeates most of our dinner time conversation. But you can do that. You can do that. This is what I get to do as a travel writer, is travel a lot, think a lot, learn a lot, meet a lot of people, and write about it. As I said, my beat is Europe, and I love my beats. I can never exhaust Europe of what it has to offer. One of my primary things is finding places that are what I call back doors. Places that somehow are keeping their head above the flood of the 21st century. Places that have no promotional budgets. Places that are just going through another century. Now, to be honest, it's kind of hard to find those places now compared to the past, but there still are a lot of amazing places that we can find where we are not part of the economy, but where we are part of the party. That's what we look for. Hill towns. This is Civita di Bagnoregio, 2 hours north of Rome, near Orvieto. Doesn't matter. I'm talking fundamentally cool, offbeat places anywhere on this planet you can go to. If the thing that shapes your travels is advertising, you will never go to this place. Because that's what we're up against as consumers. Advertising wants to shape our trip so people can make money off of us. You can venture, or you can follow the ads. It's not right or wrong, but as a consumer, you got to understand you are targeted, and many people are not very good at maintaining their independence. You can find these places that somehow missed the modern boat. Look at that. That's my favorite chunk of the Italian Riviera. It's not very famous, and it's not very popular because it's hard to get to. And there's no comfortable hotels here. It's a national park. Nobody can change any of their buildings. Look at that. There are no comfortable hotels, and that's actually good news because it keeps away the most obnoxious slice of the traveling public. People who insist on comfortable hotels. They're over in Portofino complaining about the crowds and the prices and the rude service. And I'm sitting here, man, I'm having the time of my life drinking wine that was made right on that hilltop, hiking through the vineyards, climbing the ruined castles, and enjoying those twinkling views of the Mediterranean with Italian friends. You can do that. You don't need to be some fancy travel writer. You don't need to speak the language. You just need to go there and buy somebody a drink and be curious. Part of my work is to bring home the magic. And a lot of the magic is natural wonders, natural thrills. You can get to the top of the Alps. She looks pretty rugged, but she's not. She's one of the less rugged people that I know. But she spent $20 with me, and we rode the lift up for breakfast in a revolving restaurant. All right? So ride the lift up, and then walk out and get a photograph taken of you looking really rugged. You can hike or frolic all the way across the Alps, from France to Slovenia, never come out of the mountains, and enjoy trails like this all along the way. Oh, baby, I love this so much. Oh, wow, I was just there, so I'm just sort of in excited vacation. But imagine walking on a ridge. You're like tight roping on a ridge high in the Swiss Alps. On one side, you got lakes stretching all the way to Germany. On the other side, you got the most incredible alpine panorama anywhere, the Eiger Monken Jungfrau. And ahead of you, you hear the long legato tones of an Alp horn announcing that the helicopter stopped mountain hut is open. It's just around the corner, and the coffee schnapps is on. That is a beautiful moment. And anybody can have it. If you're a good walker, and if you have enough money to ride that lift, and you dedicate yourself to having a magical experience on top of the Alps, you can do it. As far as culture goes, I'm thankful that I am a bumpkin. I am tired of trying to show off against the Europeans, okay? They are so excited about what they do, and I am so eager to be impressed. With that attitude, it's just more fun. When you go to Paris, you want to go to a cheese shop. It is a festival of mold. And the cheesemonger is evangelical about his cheese. And you, the American bumpkin, just came in. You are going to get a lesson in stinky cheese. Oh, sure, come over here. The goat cheese. Oh, smell this one. Oh, it smells like the feet of angels. Now, you don't have to like stinky cheese. You may think it's all a bunch of baloney. Or you may realize this is a blessing. You may go home with a passion for spending a lot of money on fancy cheese. Either way, it's nice to know that there are people who get really excited about cheese. It's a beautiful slice of a beautiful culture. And I am really into stinky cheese because of my experiences I've had there. The thing that distinguishes a good trip, I think, is how many people do you meet? Not how many famous places do you check off your silly bucket list. Not how many countries have you been to. When somebody tells me how many countries they've been to, I have to hold my tongue because I just think it's the tacky thing to count. How many people have you met? How many preconceptions have you changed? How many times have you made a mistake and actually realized it was a very exciting memory? You know, those are the magic things about travel. I love to be an extrovert in my travels. You know, some people are better at that than others, but all of us can work to meet people. And that's the mark of a good traveler. I love Ireland for one reason, because people have this wonderful gift of gab. They love to not look at their phone as much as talk to people. And in Ireland, I get the sensation. I enjoy the sensation that I'm understanding a foreign language. I speak only English, nothing to brag about, but I admit it in my talks because a lot of people kind of assume, people ask me how many languages do you speak? And it's a funny question because I only speak English. I'm a typical American monoglot. We can get away with it because we're the one linguistic group that can get away with being so lazy linguistically, because we speak the language that is the world's common denominator. India is as diverse as the United States culturally and linguistically, or as diverse as Europe culturally and linguistically. But English is the language of business and the language of travel. In Europe, any young person, any educated person, any person in tourism is going to speak English. I've been saying you can manage fine English ever since I was a kid. A whole generation has gone by, and now more people speak English better than ever. There's a very important chapter in my Europe to the Backdoor book called Hurdling the Language Barrier, and it talks about how we can communicate speaking in what the Voice of America calls simple English. But really, I'm able to travel wherever I like, using fundamental communication skills just fine. But Ireland is nice because you got this wonderful gift of gab. You got people that love to talk, and they've got that beautiful lilt and creative way of talking. So if you've got a long list of sites today and you meet these guys and you get into a conversation, this is more important than that one extra site. talk to them. This is way on the west coast of Ireland, where the old guys stand there and they look out from the bluff and they gaze out at the Atlantic and they say, the next parish over is Boston. I was talking to these guys, and after a while I asked the man on the left, were you born here? And he said, no, it's about 5 miles down the road. Later on I asked him, have you lived here all your life? And he said, not yet. It's funny, I had that conversation a long time ago, and they gave me those fun 2 little memories, and it's not unusual to walk away from any conversation with an Irishman with all sorts of fun. We have opportunities that you can't imagine to make memories. If you're hiking in the Italian Riviera and you go into a little church and you meet a monk who runs the abbey there and he says, I've got some homemade limoncello, could I invite you in to try some? What is the answer? Yes. If you got to train in 20 minutes, miss it. You're going to get drunk with an Italian monk. This is going to be really cool. Great limoncello, wonderful band, beautiful conversation, unforgettable. He didn't know who I was. Anybody could have met him and have that experience. I'm a cultural chameleon in my travels. I change every time I cross a border. You know, when I'm in, I don't care about chocolate in this hemisphere, to be honest. I mean, it's okay, but it's barely worth the calories. But when I am in Belgium, I become a chocoholic. That's the place. If ever you were going to say chocolate is to die for, you can say that, I think, right? And then what you do is you go to the little town and you find the most venerable chocolateria, the gourmet chocolate shop, run by Madame Dumont and her family for generations, beloved in their town. And you let her show off. You get the whole education, you sample everything she wants you to sample, and then you buy a little mix for the road. That's a beautiful experience. Anybody can have that. When I'm in Tuscany, I do not order a beer. You're in the land of full-bodied red wine, and 3 Italian words you should know is corposo, vino, rosso. Okay? Now, when I'm in Prague, I've never had a glass of wine. I don't even want to taste a glass of Czech wine, I'm sorry. They've got the best beer I have ever had, the Pilsner there. And that's what I want to have in the Czech Republic. I don't work all day in Seattle and come home and crave a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. Just makes no sense. But I don't let a sun go down on the Greek Isles without a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. And when I'm in France, that's where I have my escargot. I'm a tour guide. My job is to make Americans eat snails. And for decades, I've been taking the bus from Switzerland into France, and that first night, I just get so excited as a teacher. My children, the 24 people on my bus, they're all gonna get a chance to eat a snail. And if you've had escargot here and you don't like them, you don't know what an escargot tastes like. You've got to have it in France. You don't have to like it, but you got to try it. I buy 2 dozen escargot and I take it on. Everybody gets one. Half of them squeaks up their nose and don't like it, and they try it. Okay, yuck. Half of them actually tomorrow night on their free evening out, they go to another restaurant and they order a half dozen escargot just for themselves. I order a dozen. But that's the kind of attitude you need. And with that attitude, you'll spend less money, you'll learn more, you'll have more smiles in your travels, and you'll take home with you some new passions. In our travels, it's important that we're not ethnocentric. Remember that the ugly American concept? For a long time, I don't hear it very much anymore, thank goodness, but you know, a lot of Americans were called ugly Americans. They're not bad people, they just were ethnocentric. They thought we were the norm. They're not just ugly Americans. When you travel, there's ugly Japanese, ugly Chinese, ugly Indians, ugly Germans, ugly Russians. Those are the ugly countries because they're big. And it's reasonable for people from those countries to think they're the norm. It's harder to find an ugly Bulgarian, or an ugly Estonian, or an ugly Norwegian, because you've only got 3 or 4 million people that speak your language, and it's hard to imagine that you are the norm, you see. But it's easy for us to think we drive on the right side of the road, and they drive on the wrong side of the road. I mean, we just look at it that way. It's easy to think that people who sit on something when they go to the bathroom are the norm. No, we're the oddballs. Oh man, it's so fun to recognize that. So you don't want to be ethnocentric. That's this way. And you don't want to be chronocentric either. Now that's a new one for me, and I've been thinking about chronocentrism lately because my guide friends in Europe are walking on eggshells these days not to offend somebody by embracing something that used to be okay and is not okay now. You know what I'm talking about, all this PC kind of stuff. So I think the PC stuff is great in 2024 for 2024, but I don't want to judge and condemn people who were not as advanced as in that from centuries ago or generations ago for not being as with it as we are. We've worked very hard, we've come a long way, we've got a long way to go. We should feel proud about that. But in my teaching and with my tour guide and my outlook in Europe, I want to get into the mindset back when people didn't have the printed word, back when there was no science, back when they didn't have the sensibilities that we have today. A good example would be at the greatest church in Christendom, St. Peter's Basilica. This is 500 years old, and when I step in there, for years, I was in a bad mood. I was pissed off. Saints. All this gold leaf. Where'd they get this money? What could they done with this money? They conned all these people in Germany to thinking they'd go to heaven if they gave them money, and then they built this. It just bothered me. And then it occurred to me, come on, Rick, park your Lutheran sword at the door. Go in here as a temporary Roman Catholic. Appreciate it on its terms. All the difference in the world. I'm so thankful I realized that. It seems kind of silly, but this was the best they could do to glorify God 500 years ago. It's an amazing building, and to think of what they did, and to understand what you're looking at, and to know the story and to respect it. The guy with the bushy beard and the key, that's St. Peter. He's buried right there under the dome. And the dome, designed by Michelangelo, taller than a football field on end, it's ringed by words from the Bible, 6-foot tall letters in Latin, surrounded by gold leaf mosaic. They say, "Tu are Petrus, you are Peter. And upon this rock I will build my church." This is the holiest place for 1 billion Roman Catholic Christians. It's a whole different attitude. As a tour guide, I for 25 years, I've taken groups in and out of that place. Some people are humbled by it and inspired by it, and other people are just, it's like a frat party, So there's two different approaches you can have to the cultural and art treasures. I'm really into this idea that the more understanding you bring to your sightseeing, the more you'll get out of it. People ask me for budget tricks. I can't get you into the windmill any cheaper than the next person. Well, I'll pay $10. But if you understand what a windmill is, you'll have double the experience. If you go to a windmill and you don't know what an Archimedes screw is, you don't know really what a windmill's all about, you see. Centuries ago, the ingenious Dutch, who had almost no resources, were able to harness the wind and harness that power. And when the wind kicks up, it turns those big blades with a series of gears. It makes this motion, and that spiral contraption at my feet is an Archimedes screw that would kick that into motion, and it would pump water from down there over the dike and into the sea. They would bail out the seabed, turn that salty seabed into fertile farmland, and become wealthy, powerful nation because of their ingenuity. Now when you climb that ladder and you feel the groaning, aching, creaking, centuries-old oak beams turning and twisting with the wind, and you think of that, and then you look on the horizon and you see all the modern wind turbines, it's just quite an interesting experience. It enriches the experience. Another example is the famous aqueduct in southern France, the Pont du Gard near Avignon. You've probably heard of that. It's not really an aqueduct. It's the most scenic bridge in a 30-mile-long aqueduct, engineered by Romans 1,800 years ago to bring water in a man-made little square river on the top of that thing into the city of Nîmes, using not the sweat of peasants, but gravity. Engineered so the water would drop 1 inch every 100 yards for 30 miles. Wow. How many travelers who go to the Pont du Gard even know what it really does, Because there's no incentive for the tour guide to teach you or to inspire you to be smart. And It's just a photo op. It's a potty stop. It's a souvenir shop. It's a lost opportunity. Wow, imagine going to the end of that in Nîmes and looking at the end of that 30-mile-long structure and imagining the jubilation on that day, 1,800 years ago, when water gushed into the city. And the people of Nîmes thought, well, we lost the war to the Romans, but at least we're on the winning side now. We got stability, we got roads, we got running water. I was just in Oslo. I'm always going to Europe to update my guidebooks. And the cool new thing on the harbor front in Oslo is called the Peace Bench. And the Peace Bench is right in front of the Nobel Peace Prize Center. And there's a little quote by Nelson Mandela etched into the pavement in front of it. And it says, the most powerful weapon is talking to each other. And with this Peace Bench, shaped like a smile, you can't sit apart, you come together. And it's just a beautiful thing. It reminds me, when you travel, the world is a celebration of diversity. You'll see these rainbow streets in almost every city these days in Europe. And it's just a positive acknowledgement that we're all in this together. Let's learn to live together. I was in Iceland a lot this last year. And I love how in Iceland, the swing sets are in a circle. When I grew up, the swing sets were a straight line and everybody could swing parallel. But I had so much fun watching the kids coming together. And it really was sort of a metaphor of their beautiful society. Just full of giggles, kicking their feet, and in a circle. This little girl reminds me of many times when I was little. And my parents had friends over, it was boring, and I just crawled into the other room and I climbed into a big overstuffed chair and I took a nap. She could be in Mexico, she could be in Pakistan, she could be in Canada, she could be any number of places. She's in Iran. And when I saw her, I just thought, little girls like that, wherever they happen to be born, they sure have a lot in common. They sure like their gelato. And in my travels, I've noticed that, yes, we love our liberty, but there's places that think they even have more than us. This is in Spain, in the hometown of Salvador Dali, Cadaqués. And I love traveling and seeing different cultures celebrating their heritage, their traditions. I love when there's something built into the festivals that helps the old people make sure that the traditions of their culture that they treasure will be handed from generation to generation to generation. In this little town in Italy, northern Italy, there's a festival every summer where the older kids teach the younger kids how to make a good ravioli. Here in this valley in Burgundy, where the finest wine in the world is made, the Chamber of Commerce pooled its humble resources and made these glass orbs where visitors can actually smell the bouquet of the different wines that are produced proudly in that valley. I just thought, what a wonderful community effort that is. And they're so proud of it, and it's fun to check it out. All over Europe, you can go to markets with people who are happy to pay too much for their bread in order to buy it from the person who baked it. It's not practical, it's not right or wrong, it's impractical from an economic point of view. I live in a country where people aspire to have a freezer in the garage so they only have to go shopping every 10 days and they can go to the big box store and really get that economy of scale. That is a turn on here in America. That's not a turn on in France. In France, they managed to have a small refrigerator under the sink, so they have to go to the market every morning. Pay too much for their stuff, but buy it from their neighbors and connect with each other. It's part of their family values. It's part of the weave of their society. Again, it's not right or wrong. It's just stimulating for me to go there and to realize that that is an option. Europeans love their fine wine. They really appreciate fine wine. And they also know where to fill it up cheap. This is a wine filling station outside of Orvieto. And a couple times a year, people fill up all their empty jugs in their car and they drop by the filling station and they got their table wine. I think it's the cheapest liquid you could buy in Italy. So all of these are just kind of fun ideas how you can compare the cultures of the United States and Europe. And as I mentioned, Europe is my beat, and we are like sister societies in so many ways. We can learn from each other. I've tried to put my finger on what is the difference between Europe and America, because we're so different, we're so similar, we're so affluent, we're so into pluralism, and capitalism, and we're generally Christian society, and but there's really differences, and I think I'm trying to figure it out, to be honest. And in the United States, I find that we are government by, for, and of the people via the corporations that we own. We need to create a good environment for our corporations to work well so we can prosper. It makes total sense. In Europe, I think it's government by, for, and of the people in spite of the corporations they own. We have this short-term profit maximization, almost legal requirement in our economy. And in Europe, they see the government as a referee that comes in there and sets parameters and makes sure that things are, sustainable, or that poor people are being taken care of, or something like that. It's a different way to run their society, where we have pledge drives. They don't like to tax public television. They would have a TV tax. In England and in Norway and so on, when you buy a TV and you take it home and you plug it in, you get BBC, and then you get a tax, you see. So it's, again, not right or wrong, but it is interesting to see how different societies deal with different challenges. There are a lot of very powerful political dynamics going on right now in the democratic world. And this photograph here kind of haunts me. This is a group of good people. People, I suppose, if there was a World Affairs Council in the 1920s in Berlin, they might have been members. And when I look at this, I think, okay, that's Germany in the 1920s or the early 1930s. And Germany was not the only place that was dealing with autocracy and having their democracies derailed. Spain, Portugal, half of Europe was fascist in the 1930s. And they had charismatic, bombastic politicians that knew how to derail a democracy, how to demoralize respect for journalism, how to tell big lies over and over and over, how to scapegoat minority groups, how to scare their people with the refugee problems, and on and on. And they were elected. And then when they got elected, they turned themselves into autocrats. And this is the Parliament building in Berlin. And an interesting and underrated attraction or site there is the memorial in the foreground here. That's the memorial to the politicians, the Congress people, the senators of Germany, who were the first inmates at Hitler's concentration camps. Those are the first people he sent to concentration camps. These were the politicians that wouldn't pledge loyalty to him when he took over. These were the politicians that remained independent from that party. And it's pretty powerful. If you look at each of these slate slabs, it has a name of the politician, the concentration camp he went to, and when he died, which was not very much later than when he went there. It's a chilling sight. It's a chilling sight. And when I look at that, I also think Germany in the 1920s, these guys were famous and respected. 1930s, they were locked up and in concentration camps and then dead. In the 1940s, Germany was in rubble. That's history. We can learn from history. Poland has a big problem with this. Hungary's got a big problem with this. Turkey's got a big problem with this. We have a similar dynamic in our society going on right now. It's complicated. But history, I'm a historian. I'm so thankful that we have history to learn from. And I think it behooves a society to learn from its history. This Parliament building was the site of the last days of World War II. Germans fighting Russians on top of that. And then it was a bombed out hulk in the middle of no man's land between a divided country, East Germany, West Germany. The capital was no longer in bombed out Berlin, but over in Bonn. And after a generation, the wall was down, Germany was united, and the government went back to Berlin, and they needed a new Capitol building. What did they do? In good European style, they didn't bulldoze the old building and build a new one. They renovated the old building and incorporated into it a beautiful architectural design on top to celebrate their unity, to celebrate the hope that they had in their future as a democracy. And I happened to be in Berlin, on top of that building on opening day. And I didn't plan for that, but I was just lucky and I was there. And I was on top of that building, surrounded by teary-eyed Germans. Now, anytime you're surrounded by teary-eyed Germans, something exceptional is going on. And it occurred to me, wow, this is the emotional, dramatic turning point in this country. After so much heartache, after so much hard history, Germany was now united. The capital was back in Berlin. They had a new, glorious, shiny, proud parliament building, and they were looking into, with a strong democracy, looking into a promising future. And they are the leader of Europe right now. Wow, what a cool thing to be in witness. And I looked around at the other American tourists up there, not one of them had a clue. Not one of them had a clue of what was going on. I'm not anything brilliant about that. I was just halfway aware of the history around me and what this meant to the local people. It occurred to me that there's powerful forces in our world, in our society, that would find it more convenient, more profitable if we were all just dumbed down. And I just think Germany learned a lot from the consequences of a dumbed down electorate. Today, Germany has this passion for educating its people and educating its electorate, not with any political agenda. You know, people educate now with a political agenda. You fund a university according to your politics. I don't think Germany does that. Germany just wants critical thinkers. And it's just, to me, you could make a case for taking it out of your national defense budget, because that makes the country stronger. An educated electorate. We need that. And I'm so thankful that we have opportunities, each of us in our own walks of life, to not agree to be dumbed down. In my own little world as a TV producer and a tour guide, I've decided, yes, you can make more money selling people trinkets and duty-free shopping and frequent flyer miles and fun in the sun on the beach. But I want to sell transformational travel. I want to write shows that challenge people. My shows would not see the light of day anywhere else on the dial if there wasn't public television. I mean, what's on Travel Channel now? No travel. No travel on the Travel Channel. Why? Because the Travel Channel is here not to inspire or educate, it's here to make money off of ads, and they make more ads when they have reality gimmicks, right? And that's kind of what commercial world's all about, and that's fine, but there is that one little oasis where I can write scripts, where I can assume an attention span, where I can respect people's intelligence, and where I can make shows driven by a passion not for keeping advertisers happy, but for simply inspiring and helping people get out there and embrace the world in all its diversity. I almost feel like this is a pledge drive and there's an 800 number. So, but in my little world as a travel teacher, I'm really thankful that I've just got that ethic that I want my clientele not to be dumbed down, but to be inspired to be smarter. When we travel, we recognize the importance of the United States on this planet. I don't want to get soupy here, but you know, the ideals of America, they are huge on this planet, and they are resilient. They shine from a hill. They are so much bigger than any particular presidential administration or misguided foreign policy or greedy trade policy. The ideals of America inspire. Now, when you travel, you recognize how people really want America at the table. We had 4 years where we weren't at the table, and the world missed us. And it's tough sometimes to feel like it's always us, but we have all the reasons to be involved in the world and to help the world to stay on an even keel according to our values. And we are appreciated. Sometimes we don't feel appreciated. Let me give you an example of appreciation. I could give a whole talk on how people appreciate America. I was filming in France once, and we were shooting in a little mom and pop chateau, Chateau Rochepole. And mom and pop aristocratic family owned the place for generations. We got there, the sun's going down, we're running late. I got serious filming to do. I got to get up on the roof for a wide shot before the sun's gone. So we come there, and the dear lady that runs the place goes, "Oh, welcome, let's have a glass of wine." Well, I'd love a glass of wine, but let's get up on the roof first and get the filming done. No, we must have a glass of wine. with cheese and crackers. Okay, so we have our glass of wine, and they bring out, the children of the family bring out, like a religious relic, the 48-star flag that they hoisted over their village on that day in 1945 when Americans liberated them from Nazi tyranny. And they said, we will never have an American in our castle without bringing out our flag and thanking them for the strength and the valor that they had to go to bat for freedom and democracy. And we just want you to go home and tell your neighbors that we're thankful today. Generations later, we still are thankful for that. I've got friends in Europe, in France, and in Germany, who were born in the 1940s, a little older than me, who are named Frankie and Johnny. What's a guy named Frankie doing, born in 1948 in France? What's a guy named Johnny doing, born in 1950 in Germany? Born to a family that is so thankful for the GIs they met. They wanted their kids to be named after them. So it's important for us to remember that, I think, if we want to have a global perspective. America, you could think it's going to be better off just to stay at home and build up walls. But I'm convinced if you're concerned about nothing more than your own freedom and your own stability and your own safety, you need bridges more than you need walls. And when we travel and when we support the World Affairs Council, we're making bridges. And that is a powerful force for peace. Does that make sense? Europeans work hard. There's 400 million of them. They produce ballpark $20 trillion of stuff a year. We work hard. We produce a lot of stuff. There's 300 million of us, and we produce roughly the same $20 trillion of stuff a year. Somebody inclined to put Europe down because of their socialism would say, well, look, we make more than they do. We make the same amount of money. There's 100 million more of them. But the full analysis would be to acknowledge that Europeans may make less money than we do overall, but they choose to work fewer hours. And if you measure, honestly, a Western European and an American, they would produce essentially the same per hour. They just choose to work fewer hours and have less stuff and have more time for their families. It's not right or wrong. We Americans have the shortest vacations in the rich world, and we don't even take them all. Europeans can't understand it, you know, but this is our American dream, is to grow old at work. So, fine. But it is interesting to get over there and find out that there's an alternative. I grew up being taught the work ethic. Did my parents say, this is a work ethic? Or was it the work ethic? It was really emphatic when I think about it. This is the work ethic. You work hard. And I do. And I'm a product of that, and that's me, and I like it, you know. But it's not the only ethic. And when I travel, I realize my Norwegian relatives have a different work ethic, my Spanish friends have a different work ethic, and so on. The Dutch certainly have a different work ethic. One day I was doing my work, like a good workaholic American in Amsterdam, running around, and it's Wednesday afternoon, and I see these guys in a party boat. It's kind of annoying. These are not students, these are grown adults. And I ask them, thinking maybe I'm missing a festival or something that I should know about. I'm asking them, hey, what's going on? And they said, it's Wednesday. You want to get in the boat? It's just the European sort of sensibility. It's fun, and it's an option. I love how each country has its proud holidays. We have our 4th of July. It's August 1st in Switzerland, May 17 in Norway. 10 days after ours is France's, Bastille Day on the 14th of July. And we celebrate our heritage. And I also like how everybody has their own dream. We have the American dream. I certainly have the American dream. These Sri Lankans have the Sri Lankan dream. My Bulgarian friends have the Bulgarian dream. I used to think it was kind of not right to admit that somebody else could have a different dream than ours. But I've come to think that it's a beautiful thing. Every country, every culture, it's got its own dream. They don't need to have our dream, and we should remember that. And also we should remember different countries have different struggles. Turkey is one of my favorite places as a tour guide to travel in because there's so much to learn, and I love to expose my travelers to a pluralistic, Western-looking Muslim nation. Given the fact that there's 1 billion Muslims on the planet, and it's an important force to understand and respect. And when I'm in Turkey, the big map has all the tourist stuff on the west end, and nothing on the east end except Mount Ararat. And we used to have a tour in eastern Turkey, which was particularly interesting. And we'd be tooling around without any famous sights to see, just looking for things to pop into. And I was 20 people on the bus, me and my Turkish guide, and we found a high school stadium filled with kids having some kind of rally. Of course, stop the bus, go in, see what's happening. 100 kids gathered, thrusting their fists up into the sky in unison and singing, "We are a secular nation. We are a secular nation." Asked my guide, "What's going on here? Don't they like God?" And she says, "Oh no, we love God, but considering the rising tide of Islamic fundamentalism just over the border in Iran, we are having a pep rally for pluralism, and we're celebrating the fragile but precious separation of mosque and state." Whoa, it never occurred to me high school kids in Turkey could have a pep rally for pluralism and to protect the separation of mosque and state. But they were looking over there at Iran thinking, we don't want that. And it was a cool eye opener, and we can all have that in our travels. And it humbles us, and it gives us a respect for the challenges that other cultures are facing. Later on in that same journey, we went to a town, and I think we were the only tourists that ever got to this little town. So the mayor came out to meet us, and when you're a tour guide, you're the big shot, and the mayor, of course, is the big shot. So he invites us all into his home, and we're all dancing. And in Turkey, you just got to shake your shoulders and snap your fingers as you're dancing. So we're all doing this, and I'll never forget, the mayor comes over to me and, "Come here, Mr. Tour Guide." So we go over, and he goes, "This is the most sacred place in my house." It's on his wall, there's a hook, and hanging there is the Quran bag. In here I keep my Quran, but I also keep a copy of the Bible and the Torah, because the way I see it, we're all children of the same God, people of the book. That's what he said. And I just thought, I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I had a chance to talk to this leader in this town and to get his take on the most sacred place in his house. Later on, I was at a wedding, and it's a tradition in Turkish weddings for the oldest couple to give a blessing for the newest couple. And the old people got everybody's attention. They said, "May you grow old together on one pillow." I thought, that is a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. A couple years ago, my daughter got married, and I got to use that as part of my toast. I was walking home after an event like that, and I was noticing how disheveled the town was. All these unfinished buildings with rusty rebar exposed. And I love Turkey, and I love the Turkish people, and I was kind of disappointed. Why can't you guys just get your act together and clean up your act a little bit? And I asked somebody, "What about all this rebar?" And they said, "Well, here in Turkey, we can't put our money in the bank because the lira depreciates in value so fast that if you get $100, we like to put it into a house because it's our tradition to leave our children a house. And every time we got $100, we built another wall and leave the rebar exposed because you want to put on that and a door and a window and another wall." And they told me, here in Turkey, we say rebar holds the family together. And I just felt like a real fool for thinking it was just, disheveled. And again, I was glad I got over there and I learned a little bit of the humanity of what I was looking at. I was traveling across Afghanistan in my backpacker days a long time ago. I sat down at the cafeteria in Kabul where all the backpackers do, and a man joined me. He said, "Are you an American?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, I'm a professor here in Afghanistan, and I want you to know that 1/3 of the people on this planet eat with spoons and forks like you. 1/3 of the people eat with chopsticks, and 1/3 of the people eat with their fingers like I do, and we're all civilized just the same."